Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, pre-crime is here and it's real. We'll tell you about a technology that allows you to detect the hacks before it actually even happens. Plus, Google's Project Zero goes to war, and we'll get real about virtualization. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 177 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on August 28th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IX Systems. And don't forget to tune into the Faux Show this Sunday for a special Faux Show award show I think you're not going to want to miss. And our live stream, well, that's brought to you by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com, powering all of the Jupiter Broadcasting live streams. You've got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. I'm excited. I think we've got this is a rare occasion where Alan wakes up early, we get a show that's ready to go, and then we had like just 10 minutes to BS on the live stream.
We were just sitting here for, it was like 20 minutes, actually.
Yeah, I'm warmed up.
We were trying to waste 10 minutes. We ended up wasting 20 minutes.
Well, you know what? And nobody would believe it unless they saw it, but you started linking us to viral videos, and then we started... And we started watching videos. You'd never think that's how the pre-show goes, but that's why you should watch TechSNAP Live.
Yeah, usually, like up until like 5 minutes after the show was supposed to start, I'm still working on notes.
And you gotta, if you watch the show for a while or listen to the show for a while, particularly, you know Alan has a wicked keyboard, and it's usually like sort of the beat our pre-show goes to. But this week,
yes, that mixed in with your crazy music is just
yes.
like,
and at a certain point, I cut off all RMS quotes. You know, there's like a buffer zone before TechSNAP. You just clear them all out. Get them out of here. Get it out of here. Our first story, Alan, I'm wondering if there's some way maybe Jupiter Broadcasting could take advantage of this, because apparently a new set of tools makes it possible to predict, like pre-crime, what website's going to get hacked next. Is this legit, Alan?
Yes, although it's not. It's very useful and a very good set of tools.
Sure.
It's just not maybe as revolutionary as you first thought.
Okay.
So researchers at Carnegie Mellon University have developed a tool they call the classifier. That doesn't have a cool name yet.
The classifier.
They can help predict if a website is likely to become compromised or turn into one of those websites that serves up malicious files.
Okay.
So what they did is they got a big list of websites that had been hacked or found to be serving malware. And they used archive.org to go back to those websites up to a year before they got hacked.
The good old Wayback Machine.
And compare some of the parameters and look for patterns and things like that. So they say the classifier correctly predicts 66% of future hacks in a one-year period with a false positive rate of 17%. So it's not perfect, but...
No, but that's not bad.
You know, it gives a fairly good indication of that your website may be vulnerable or it's likely not.
Yeah. Yeah, actually,
so
I take
classifier, that. The classifier is focused on web server malware, or put more simply, the hacking and hijacking of a website, and then using it to attack the visitors of the website. So it's not so much about which website's going to get hacked and have its database stolen, but more which website's going to be modified to attack its visitors. That was their focus in building this tool. So the tool looks at a bunch of different things about the website, like what server software it's running. If it's running outdated versions of Apache and PHP, probably more likely to be vulnerable, right? So that makes it fairly easy to predict whether a website might get hacked in the future. If the version you have is out of date, and it was out of date 6 months ago, it's probably going to be out of date in 6 months from now.
So you're telling me this is an automated version of what I used to get paid good money to do?
Not quite. It does a lot of other things, and more importantly, it does machine learning.
So
it's learning to do this automatically.
Oh, no.
So it detects new patterns that weren't previously known or found by a human yet.
Man, that's great.
It also looks at like how the website was laid out, how often it's updated, what applications it runs, and also looks for shifts in traffic. If all of a sudden this minor website gets very popular, it's very likely that it's been infected and somebody's sending it traffic because it's hosting the malware. Right? That's an indicator I've seen on even my sites before. At a server that has a whole bunch of people's like tiny websites left over from when I was a consultant years ago, and one of them all of a sudden went over its bandwidth limit. I was looking at it, and it's because somebody had hacked an old PHP photo gallery software that was on there and put up like a bank phishing website or something, and had been directing people to it.
Yeah, there's obviously no published statistic on this, but I would bet you one of the number one ways people figure out that they've been compromised is by their bandwidth graphs. Because, and the reason why I say that is every time that I had a client or when I worked at the school district that we had a machine that was compromised, every time we found it because of the bandwidth graphs. It's one thing you always have in place. It's something you watch all the time because there's a cost associated with it. You definitely notice a spike, and then it doesn't take much to go, okay, this peak was generated by this IP. You go to that IP, oh, guess what? We have FTP running on this, and somebody's been using it for their personal MP3 archive. That's actually literally what happened.
That's why in like the Nagios instance I run, we graph like every parameter we can, because it's the easiest way to tell when there's a problem. All of a sudden, this server seems slower than it used to be.
Right.
Well, what's different? You know, looking at a graph of like the last week or the last month and be like, okay, well, all of a sudden on this day, the amount of CPU you were using went way up. What did we change on that day?
Right. What happened exactly?
We moved this traffic over here, so that makes sense. Or all of a sudden, the free disk space dropped really sharply that day, or it's been trending down very sharply since this day. And that, you know, graphs are really easy for the human brain to kind of understand the pattern.
Networking bandwidth usage, number one, and the number two, and unfortunately, you know, this is even in places where we had extremely sophisticated log analysis. The number two thing that we would catch is CPU usage. Like CPU would just be going crazy on a box. It'd be like a single process that's pegging one of the cores, or one of the CPUs actually in this case, a physical CPU, and you find it that way. And you go there and go, oh, well, look, this is a bad process. And
and like I've got also the number of processes running on the system. It's like all of a sudden something went crazy over here, or all of a sudden it went way down, something broke and isn't working, or and different things like that. So anyway, the classifier tool looks for a bunch of different things. So it also compares sites to other sites that have been compromised. If your site is very much alike to some other website that was compromised, that increases the probability that your site will also be compromised. Right? If we see this rash of a whole bunch of
WordPress sites
that are running a certain piece of software getting hacked, and you're running the same piece of software, the chance that you'll get hacked is increased.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Or, I mean, look at Heartbleed, right?
Yeah, exactly. The classifier looked at many other factors, you know, if a sudden change of popularity and things like that. But the most common marker for a hackable website was the presence of the generator meta tag with a value of WordPress 3.2.1 or 3.3.1. And they had a bunch of other ones, you know, certain a blog roll software or something within there, and then in the paper they talk about other ones. It's like, well, we saw this one, and it was never on a hacked website, only ever on a legitimate website. And they also found things like if a website has comments enabled, but there are no comments, that could mean something. Versus, you know, if
it's
there are
like it's a zombie site.
Yeah, or like that website never got human traffic.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
Or if the only comments are spam comments, and this website's obviously doesn't have someone going through and deleting the spam.
Yep.
And that could be an indicator, and so on.
And think about like how many blogs have been set up just to game SEO that are probably being unmanned at this point, right? They're just sitting there waiting for somebody to come and beat on them because they're probably running ancient versions of the CMS software.
Yep. Now, although they get people that are doing it for SEO and are really good at it, will make sure it's updated, because
Google weighs that.
Getting on the Google blacklist for hosting malware really hurts your Google ranking, and they don't want that to happen to them. So the certain people that are doing SEO are actually more careful about that than people that are running the blog for the sake of running a blog.
Right. But I think what happens is,
you know, when you set up your mom a blog or something, then that's the one that doesn't always get updated, right?
Right. Good point. That happens too.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on that story, Alan?
Just one last one. It actually reminded me of another company and tool that I've been hearing about recently from the people at Norse. I know they employ a bunch of FreeBSD people, but they've got this device that sits on your network and analyzes network traffic and actually attempts to detect new zero-day exploits before anybody knows they are there. Right, so they're looking for patterns and actually isolating, hey, somebody's doing this against this program.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they have security analysts that look into it further and be like, oh, look, we just found the 0-day that no one else has found yet because somebody's trying to use it against us.
I'm not saying it is, but or isn't. But how is that different than the early days of when the antivirus industry was early and sort of like developing these? We've detected patterns that viruses follow, and we can
and stuff.
Yeah, like how is this
similar,
different?
except for this one's doing it network traffic wise instead.
That
The biggest thing is it's just looking for patterns
guess
by putting them in. The difference here is that they're coordinated, right? Your virus scanner, especially those old heuristic ones, only had the heuristics that were with your definitions.
Yeah, right.
This one is this device put in a bunch of different companies and places, and then they all working together to find the pattern.
Well, and I guess if you're gonna most times if you're banging on SSH, you're doing something crazy over port 22, right? And so you know that from a network standpoint, these are the hotspots to watch, and you can almost infer what the activity is just based on the just traffic to a port, regardless of what the packets are in some cases. So
right. Well,
that's almost an easier pattern to follow.
We're seeing this weird pattern on traffic to the web server.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden, we're getting these giant responses from the web server that, oh, it's a Heartbleed, right? Or something to try to find it earlier than that.
Yeah.
Giant def. The one I'm talking about specifically is the Dark Watch. I'm not familiar with their whole product line. I just know some people that work there.
Alan responding to the chat room.
Yes, sorry.
For you audio listeners. All right, Alan. Well, why don't I take a break right here? And I will mention our first sponsor this week, and that is DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean right now because August is almost up. So why not rock a little support for the TechSNAP program by going over to DigitalOcean.com and get ready. Save this promo code. It's SNAPAugust, one word, undercase, all lowercase, like a boss. None of that uppercase shenanigans, all lowercase, SNAPAugust. Let me tell you a little bit about DigitalOcean. I have several droplets, some for personal use and definitely a few for business use. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Users can create a cloud server in under 55 seconds, and pricing plans start at only $5 per month, which will get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, one CPU, and a terabyte of blazing fast transfer.
Do they have a template that'll do WordPress for you?
One button, Alan. One button. And it'll use your favorite technology, too, if you want, Docker. Or not. It depends on how you decide to deploy it. They actually have another one that has been a huge hit for our Coder Radio audience is one-button deployment of GitLab. As you start to create multiple projects on GitHub and you want to get to a pro account when you're collaborating and things like that, it can get ridiculously expensive. So think about how a $5 DigitalOcean droplet could get you one-click deployment of GitLab that then, A, you're subscribed to the repo, so you're always getting updates. Same with the operating system. You're paying $5 a month. You get 512 megabytes of RAM. You get a 20 gigabyte SSD. You get a dedicated CPU and a terabyte of transfer for $5 a month. And that's just with GitLab. You want to throw XMPP on there? Sure. You want to throw OwnCloud on there? Why not? BitTorrent Sync? Super easy. It's great. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. And anywhere you go, it's all powered by their amazing, simple, and intuitive control panel, which is awesome because power users can replicate the control panel on a much larger scale with DigitalOcean's awesome, super great, straightforward API. I have heard from several developers in the audience, they're like, I don't normally call an API beautiful, but the DigitalOcean API is beautiful. And that is DigitalOcean top to bottom. That's exactly how they operate, and that's why I love recommending them. And also, if you've become a DigitalOcean customer based on some of the spots here in this show, go over to DigitalOcean right now. Check them out if you haven't, because I think you'll be impressed. If you already have, though, you might consider following them on Twitter. They just tweeted, yesterday. Set up a private network DNS server using the Bind software. A DigitalOcean article, boom, right here. If you want your own private DNS, and why not? If DigitalOcean has all of these data centers to choose from, you can control your own DNS up on a droplet at one of these DigitalOcean locations. It can be your own private DNS server, and that's going to be lightning fast. And they've got a guide on how you can do it. And of course, just at DigitalOcean on Twitter. And they've also just posted they're moving out. Look at that. Look at them moving out. They say it's bittersweet at their last day. And DigitalOcean's moving up because they're just growing like crazy. And you can go with them. Go to DigitalOcean.com and use our special promo code SNAPAugust when you check out. SNAPAugust when you check out, and you'll get a $10 credit. And you can try out their $5 droplet for 2 months for absolutely free. DigitalOcean.com. SNAPAugust when you check out. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
I have also, just as an aside, if you're looking to set up DNS servers, this week's episode of BSD Now, we talked about setting up NSD and Unbound, two light, authoritative, and light resolver domain server that are a little faster and easier to set up if you only need 1 or 2 domains and don't need all the fancy features you get with Bind.
Episode 52, which also means you guys just hit the year mark.
Yes, we'll be doing our fancy 1-year thing next week.
Congratulations, reverse takeover. Yeah, you know what I have up on DigitalOcean is my most recent. I have several things, but my most recent is OwnCloud 7. And I'm using OwnCloud 7 to sync my phone, like everything. My notes, my contact list, my calendar, my task list, and not my photos yet, but almost everything up to my OwnCloud instance on a DigitalOcean droplet. It's really cool. And it's, I mean, totally worth the $5 a month, like hands down. Yeah. Why not rock the support for TechSNAP, Snap August, when you check out? So, Alan, we've talked briefly, I think, in the roundup about, I think we've talked about Project Zero before, but I'm not sure.
When it got announced a couple of months ago, we did talk about it briefly in the roundup, I think,
And now we actually have some results from Google's Project Zero?
Yeah, so this is Google paying a bunch of security researchers to sit there and try to come up with 0 days and get them fixed.
Mm-hmm. It's a great initiative.
So a little over a month ago, they found a null byte poisoning attack against glibc, which is the GNU C library that's basically the core of Linux, all the GNU tools and everything. And so they found a bug and reported it. However, there was much skepticism about the exploitability of the bug, and so there was no big rush to fix it. So they, as is apparently the policy of the Project Zero people, they wargamed it. They're like, okay, we know this vulnerability exists. Let's try to find a way to exploit it and to, be the attacker. So they came up with this working exploit that even includes an ASLR bypass for 32-bit OSs, so they can still do the memory exploit, even though the address space layout randomization is enabled. And basically, in finding this exploit in a way to actually exploit it and everything, they found a bunch of other kind of ephemeral issues that should also be fixed. So
I like
details
this.
the process that the team went through to develop the exploit and use it to get root to get a root shell as a regular user. So obviously, kind of a big deal. The blog post also details some interesting stuff they found with. It turned out to not be exploitable in Ubuntu because the path was an even number of characters, whereas on Fedora, it was an odd number of characters, which left that off by 1, which allowed them to exploit it.
And this is Fedora 20 32-bit, right?
Yeah. They specifically chose 32-bit because the smaller memory space meant less place for ASLI to hard the stuff. They also discussed a workaround for other issues they ran into. Specifically, once they had done the exploit against a setuid binary, when they ran system/bin/sh, they found that because of the system in bash to drop privileges once it starts, it was because the system call actually forks a shell with that command. It was actually calling bin/sh with the command bin bash. Now, depending on your system, that could be the same thing, or on Ubuntu and Debian, that's actually sh is dash versus bash. But anyway, they found that when they did that, they would just get a shell as the user they were originally starting as, not as root. So what they did was make a little chroot environment and put their own bin bash or bin sh in it that just called setuid 0. So then they chrooted so that it would run that bin sh when they ran the system bin bash, and then that would execute a real shell with real root privileges and give them full control over the system. So they basically tricked it, the system syscall, into calling their version of bin sh,
right?
So that it would call setuid 0 and not drop the privileges from bash.
That actually seems pretty obvious now that you say it out loud.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it took me a little while to get. It's like, how were they not stuck in the chroot? But anyway, they said the path they used to get the root shell relies on a memory leak in the setuid binary, pkexec. So they also recommend that gets fixed as well.
Yeah, maybe a good recommendation.
And they said the ability to lower the ASLR strength by running setuid binaries with carefully chosen U limits is unwanted behavior. Ideally, setuid programs would not be subject to attacker chosen U limit values.
Huh.
So basically, by limiting the amount of memory it could have, I think they made it really large so that when the allocation happened, there was only so many places it could be. So there was less possible randomness of where the chunk of memory could get put because they made it so large. Anyway, there's all the details in the blog post there. They said the exploit would be complicated significantly if the malloc main linked list hardening was also applied to the secondary linked list for large chunks. So basically, the way the memory allocator works, it has this metadata area that is guarded. And so when the overflow happens and it gets into that, it's supposed to get detected. But they made it so it overrode it enough that when malloc looked at it, it was like, oh, that was free memory. And then so it would keep going till the next one, and then they could fool it and make it do stuff that they didn't want to. But anyway, so after that, they finally got the glibc bug fixed. So you can look for that update for your OS coming soon.
To a OS near you soon.
So anyway, there's a lot more detail about all the steps they went through to get to the root shell in there. There's quite a few steps.
Okay, so this is really the first bit of meat we've heard come out of Project Zero. Are you a little disappointed that they kind of... I mean, this is great work, but also, at the same time, who gives a shit about 32-bit server distros?
Well,
on Fedora at that.
Like, ASLR is disabled. This would work perfectly fine on 64-bit.
I suppose so, yeah.
And they could make it work on 64-bit as well if they tried harder.
So if you're using...
the same thing, this could be made to work on Ubuntu as well, I think.
Right, okay. I mean,
they just went for the easiest target so they could just prove that it was exploitable.
I guess.
All they were trying
right?
to do
Yeah.
They found the bug, and then the glibc people are like, we don't think that's a big enough deal to fix.
And they're like, let me prove it to you.
Yeah, so they're like, blah.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Configuration shows how we could escalate to root with that.
Yeah.
So fix it, right?
Because at first pass I'm like, well, so they used a distro that only a masochist would use on a server. They used 32-bit, which who deploys a server with less than 4 gigs of RAM now? And like, I'm just going down the list. But when you say it like that, it's like it's really to just we need to prove to them we can do it, and we don't need to spend a lot of time making the ideal environment. We just need to prove it's possible.
Yeah, so they chose the environment that would make it easiest for them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Obviously it's exploitable on all the other platforms with a little bit more work. They just it's like we would like to get on to finding the next 0 day at some point.
And
remember when we talked about the one for the controlling the traffic signals?
Yes,
Michigan.
Last week.
It's like they could have reverse engineered the protocol to make a regular wireless antenna talk to it.
Yeah,
but they just scammed somebody into giving them the right kind of radio so they could do that.
Yeah.
So rather than waste the time, they could spend the time reverse engineering the protocol of how the controller talks to the stoplet.
eBay is an amazing thing. When I looked at this first, so I guess zooming out, the part of this story I like is that they go into war game mode at a certain point. And we're like, okay, well, now we need to prove it. So let's go into war game mode. Who wants to have some fun? And it's still like it's this positive environment, but it allows people to sort of exercise that malicious kind of, not malicious, but that hacker mentality where you want to break it and fix it. And it gives them like an outlet to do that in a way that's sort of a competition too.
Here is great. It's like GeoHot quickly coded up a challenge, and we were able to gain root execution.
Right? Like, how awesome is that? Like, that is exactly like. So that's why I'm really glad that months ago after Heartbleed, when I was like, the tech industry needs to come together and they need to solve this problem because they're making money off the backs of the software and they're not ensuring it's safe for their customers to use. That was kind of my soapbox. And now we've seen some things step up. We've seen some coalitions. We see like Project Zero. And what I love is that it didn't, this war game thing to me implies that it's not too bureaucratic, right? It's not too political. Like, they're still willing to have some fun with it and encourage people to kind of have at it. And I think when you sort of allow that sort of impulse, you're going to get the best results. So I think that's really cool. All right,
They do have a couple other posts up here. They have a macOS 10 and iPhone sandbox escape, something about what do pointers look like anyway, and a summary of their participation in Pwn for Fun Spring Safari.
Have you ever noticed how much sand actually leaks out of Apple sandboxes? I'm just saying, whenever they have a sandbox, that seems to be spilling sand all over the place. I don't know what's up with that. But I do know what's up with some other stuff. Any other thoughts on that story, Alan?
Not really, no.
Okay. Well, then I'll tell you what's up with iX Systems, our next sponsor on the TechSNAP program, right now. Stop what you're doing. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and go check out the awesome hardware over at iX Systems powered by Intel Xeon processors. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. That's where Alan and I go anytime we need anything that's enterprise grade. Stuff we want to bet our jobs on, we go to iX Systems. And iX Systems has been around for a long time.
At my house.
What's that?
I also use them at my house.
Yeah, me too. Oh, for sure. I mean, business critical. Well, dude, if anything, stuff working at my house is 10 times more important than stuff working at my job, because I hate getting that phone call from the wife saying, this isn't working. You know all that crap you set up here at the house with this and that and that? I want to work it right now. I never want that call, and that's why I use iX Systems. You might be in a similar situation. And, you know, something we haven't really pointed out in a long time is this great timeline that iX Systems has posted over on their website. This really kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And really shows you, like, iX Systems has been around and involved in the community for a long, long time. And I think they're, you know,
and it also kind of goes through the reason why they're such a good company. Like, kind of explains the background of the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they went through the .com thing and
Right.
you know, the trying to be a startup and having an exit strategy and stuff. And they're like, no, we're never doing that again. We'd rather be the company that has happy customers and employees that like their job.
Yeah.
And that's why they're really nice to deal with, because, you know, it's just a completely different culture, right? It's people like us, you know, it's sysadmins and programmers running a company and doing it well.
And they just introduced, speaking of doing it well, Alan, they just introduced the TrueNAS Z50, the Z50, and am I right? It's all flash-based, and they've been talking about it at VMworld?
Yes, they nicknamed it the True Flash. There was an interview they did with Tweaktown or somebody, I forget, at VMworld where they talked a bit about it. But basically, it's a machine filled with the Hitachi HDST solid-state drives, and it's completely flash-based. And they've specifically tuned it to be able to use ZFS deduplication feature.
Okay.
Which normally we tell people, no, turn it off.
Yeah.
Right? But this one, because it's all SSDs, you're not going to have the performance problem, and it has enough RAM to deal with it.
So what kind of storage are you talking about, all flash-based, with this thing?
Well, there's the actual storage, which, depending on your configuration, I think goes up to about 20 terabytes.
Of flash storage.
Yeah. With the deduplication, you get 5 to 15 times, or some, depending on the workload, up to 100 times deduplication ratio. So based on that, you can easily expect to get 300 terabytes of usable storage on a single enclosure.
Oh, gosh, I would love to
more than one
have
of them.
that. Oh, man, that'd be great for editing.
Yeah, well, for editing, you wouldn't get quite the same deduplication ratio as you would for virtual machines and stuff, right? But
oh, yeah, definitely for virtual machines. That's why they're talking about it at VMware, huh?
Obviously, a 20 terabyte all-flash array is great for editing, but it's not 300 terabytes.
And you know what? Actually, to be honest with you, a good percentage of every show is the same. Like, all of the bumps in music are always the same.
Yeah, but with the way video's encoded, it doesn't. The same frame won't encode the same way always.
Well, I would I would see it as the source master files would go on this TrueNAS Z50, and then
But honestly, for the editing, you're not having as much random access.
Right.
It's mostly streaming.
Yeah.
So your regular spinning hard drives can handle that.
Right. So you do that locally, and the master storage files go on this thing. And when we're working off these things, because what I'm picturing, so what I would love to do is I would love to have something. I would love to have a NAS that I could record to. I want to record to a NAS, not record to the internal drives on this Mac Pro. That's just, you know.
Mostly your bottleneck there is how many megabytes per second do you have to record?
Right now 77 megabytes, which is my network transfers.
I
can do it.
You can do that over the network, although you're getting the point where, you know, a quarter second hiccup and you're hitting the limit
I know.
there.
Yeah. No, it would have to be
with lag together NICs, or ideal maybe a 10 gig NIC, but then
this is what I'm thinking. And a dedicated network just for recording, hooked up to something like this Z50.
Or even like although I don't know that you need the Z50 for.
Well, not. I mean, something like it, right?
Anyway.
Yeah.
So the other big thing they talk about is because it's all flash, specifically when you're doing virtual machines and stuff, you get much more consistent access times. right? Normally, if you had, you know, TrueNAS that has the hard drives and then the SSDs and then the RAM or whatever, if you're accessing, you know, a part of the VM virtual image or whatever that's very popular, then it's going to be in RAM and it's going to come back really, really fast. And if it's medium popular, it'll be on the SSD cache and it'll come back quite fast. But then if you're going to the disk, that could get a little slow. But if you have all SSDs for your storage, everything is going to be sub-millisecond access times. And it's just going to be amazing. And then the biggest difference is that because it'll be able to have that 5 to 15 times deduplication ratio, it means that in the end, you're still going to get about 300 terabytes of storage. But if you compare that to 300 terabytes of regular enterprise drives, the all SSD one can end up being 3 or 4 times cheaper because the drives are more reliable and because you're buying that many fewer drives. If you use spinning drives, the problem is the deduplication will be too slow because you're going to have to scan the table all the time. Whereas when it's on SSDs, it's so fast it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved the idea.
And it's twice as cheap as most other all-flash solutions because, you know, IX trims the fat, right? They built the machine to be exactly what it needs and nothing.
And like you think about it, like if you're really going to do this, if you're going to go invest in a system like this, you want to know just for example, like some of the things Alan and I were just kicking around, like okay, I've got this machine, I have a megabit I have a must meet megabit data rate that I have to hit in order for my projects to be successful. And can I do it? What would I need? Do I need a dedicated switch? Do I need to do it over fiber? All these kinds of things. What's amazing, go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP right now to get started. You go there. You can ask them that. You can ask them the questions like this. Like I could take everything I just asked Alan and talk to a representative of IX Systems and know that the answer I got back isn't just from people who are familiar with the technical specs. These are literally people who are engineering the capabilities of the systems that are delivering what I need to sustain my business. Literally. Like, that's who I'm getting the answer from. That's an amazing resource. And you can get it too. And you get started, all of it.
I guess the other big thing is that you would tell them what you're trying to do, and they'll help you decide what one's best. So specifically, like for video editing, they would probably be like, we know you really want the flash one, Chris, but this other one over here with spinning drives will be able to meet your requirements and will save you a bunch of money.
And they'll say, you know, they'll say, Chris, we'll put this big SSD cache in front of it. It'll write to that, and then it'll copy off to whatever, right? And that's what's amazing because literally they've walked me down from like buying more than I need to, and I just can't ever think of any time that's ever happened before. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. They're amazing. They've got that white paper too you can download. If you need to convince the people above you, maybe it's time to look for a different hardware OEM. That might just do it. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Go there right now. Just let them know you appreciate them supporting the TechSNAP program and check them out.
Get the solution that solves your problem, not the most expensive thing the vendor sells.
That solves their problem, right? Their problem of making money. Yes. Okay, Alan, I've seen this story floating around the internet all week. The Secret Service has been warning people that 1,000 businesses have been hit by potential point-of-sale malware.
Yes. So this back-off point-of-sales malware has been hitting more and more places. And so the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security put out an advisory. The opening quote is, "The Department of Homeland Security encourages organizations, regardless of their size, to proactively check for possible point-of-sale malware infections. One particular family of malware, which was originally detected in October of 2013, which I do believe means Target, was not recognized by antivirus software solutions until August of 2014. It was likely infected. It has likely infected many victims who are unaware that they have been compromised." They also go on to say that 7 different point-of-sale system providers/vendors have confirmed that they have multiple clients that have all been infected. So apparently, Backoff has experts concerned because it's effective in swiping customer card data from businesses using a variety of different exfiltration tools, including memory scraping, keyloggers, injection into like Windows Explorer.exe, the actual shell of your computer, and all kinds of things like this. So a lot of these apparently, unlike the Target one, which was actually infecting the embedded POS systems, these ones are also targeting machines that are, some of the older POS systems are based on basically a card reader that connects as a keyboard and types the information into the software.
Right, yeah.
And so they have a keylogger to capture those ones, and ones that are, USB interface or whatever, and then it's with regular or embedded Windows XP, and they're basically building themselves into Explorer so that even if the malware crashes, they can restart it from inside Explorer. And so you can't, even if antivirus software tries to kill it, it will not be able to get it back right.
You know, I bet you've probably seen this. I bet the audience has probably noticed this. But since XP became end of life, I have noticed every time I go somewhere that is running XP, it just stands out. That blue start menu and that green start button. I went to my son's new school on Wednesday to just kind of meet and greet the teacher and the principal and all that. Alan, every computer I saw was running Windows XP.
Yep.
It's horrible still. It's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And these point-of-sale systems, even, you see, the thing is yes, I understand that embedded a lot of these are going to be using the one version of XP that is still updated. Here's how this works, though. These systems,
but they don't get updated.
Right. The OS is written to the ROM.
To the internet.
The OS is written to the ROM, and the only way to update the OS is if you reflash the firmware. And people are not doing this. Some of these point-of-sale devices are like SP1, SP2 of XP, like seriously old XP installations. And yes, when they reboot, they supposedly get reset. But all it takes is something persistent on the network to reinfect it, and the entire time it's running, which could be weeks at a time.
That one reminds me of the old Code Red virus. Do you remember the one that it was exploit for like internet or IIS, the Microsoft Web Server in Windows 2000.
Yeah.
And so the big virus was spread everywhere. The author put a kill switch in it. At this date, at this time, reboot the system and it'll become uninfected.
Yeah.
He forgot to consider time zones. So as each time zone hit that date, rebooted, and all the machines became uninfected, machines from the next time zone over that hadn't hit that time yet reinfected them.
Yeah.
And now it was after that date, so the kill switch didn't work anymore.
I remember it because it got one of our web servers.
Yeah.
Oh, and Slammer was good like that too. Slammer was fun. Oh, man.
But it just goes to show, if you don't, all the reasons, when you reboot it, if you don't reboot every single POS at the same time, then the one that's still infected will reinfect all the other ones, and your reboot will basically have been for naught.
For naught. All right, I know you got more on this one,
And so we've talked about this a bit before, especially the ones where it's like a whole regular desktop PC that's doing the point-of-sale stuff.
Yeah.
Don't let people run a web browser and stuff on it.
Especially
it shouldn't be connected to the internet if at all possible.
Basically.
And that way, it has less chance of getting infected.
Have it pointed at like an internal DNS server that resolves nothing externally.
Exactly. A separate network that's tightly restricted. And don't let it get the internet at all. It only can talk to the bank to process the credit cards and debit cards or whatever, and that's it. Nothing else.
I agree.
It shouldn't ever be doing anything else. So there's also a report from US CERT that said attackers use backoff to steal payment card information once they've breached a remote desktop or administration application, especially ones that are using weak or default credentials. Some of them, they're just doing brute force against this stuff and getting in because when the vendor sells you a terminal, you don't mess with it, right? It's a vendor appliance, right? It becomes an appliance, not just a computer. And it becomes outside the realm of your IT department if you even have one. Some of these are like stores that they have the 2 cash registers and they don't have any computers, right?
Yeah, very much.
And so they're outside of the IT department's control, or there's just no control at all or whatever. And so the default username and password sit there. And then the attacker uses them and takes over the system. It says backoff is then installed on a point-of-sales device and injects code into explorer.exe that allows them to scrape memory from running processes in order to steal credit card numbers before they're encrypted on the device and sent to the payment processor. Right? All this POS stuff communicates with the bank over SSL. But if you scrape it from memory when it's been read before it's encrypted, then that didn't do any good, did it? They also say the keylogger functionality is also present in most variants of the backup malware. Additionally, the malware has a command and control component that is responsible for uploading the discovered data, updating the malware. So the malware will actually install updates for itself, not for Windows, and also downloading and executing further malware and then uninstalling the malware. So after they steal all the data they want, they can actually remove the virus from the machine so that you won't notice it was there. Or they could even do crazy things I'm just imagining someone getting really cheeky. The malware installs itself at like 8 in the morning, sits there all business days, then uninstalls it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that when they look at the machine after hours,
When they do the late night scan,
yeah.
Yeah, well, we scan the systems. We have real-time scanning, and then we scan them every night at midnight. We do a system-wide scan. Yeah, we catch everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure we do.
Separate story that we'll probably get to next week. I saw a headline. It was like, if your IT department has 10 people responsible for running the virus scanner, that's probably 9 more people than are doing you any good. Because the virus scanner is not that useful, so don't put a lot of resources into it. Anyway, Krebs also has a report that Dairy Queen may have been a victim in this attack.
Dairy Queen?
Yes.
You're kidding
Dairy Queen
me.
says that Dairy Queen head office says it has no indication of a card breach at any of its thousands of locations, but the company also acknowledges that nearly every store is a franchise and that they have no established company-wide policy or process that franchisees communicate security issues or card breaches to Dairy Queen headquarters.
Sure.
So they don't. The headquarters doesn't check.
So
this
at this point, what you have just done on the TechSNAP program, live in front of an internet audience, has confirmed that hackers are systematically going after all of the places my wife uses her credit card.
They're going after all the places anyone uses.
Target, Albertsons, Michaels, and Dairy Queen. Now, I'm not trying to say my wife. I mean, that is literally all of the places my wife shops ever.
Right, but they're just going after anywhere anyone uses a credit card.
Oh man, though, Alan, the Fisher family has literally been caught in every one of these breaches. Dairy Queen for ice cream? Screw these guys.
The Dairy Queen one's not completely confirmed, although a bunch of banks have started to suspect it. You can read more on Krebs on security.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not gonna. I mean, I guess I probably shouldn't freak out, but I'm just starting to see how it does seem like a little targeted. That's all. I'm just gonna put that out there.
They're after just your money.
Yeah, well, which is, let me tell you something, Alan. Huge waste of time. Huge.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Alan. Well, why don't we take a break right here and thank our next sponsor on the TechSNAP program. That's the great folks over at Ting, TechSNAP.ting.com, TechSNAP.ting.com, or call them right now, 1-855-TING-FTW. You could call them right now. They'll take a call anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. East Coast time, and a real Canadian, boom, like Alan, answers the phone, and they are empowered to solve your problem. TechSNAP.ting.com will also take $25 off your first Ting device. If you have a Ting-compatible device, they'll give you a $25 credit. If you're like me and many of the TechSNAP viewers, that's probably going to pay for more than your first month. Soak that in. A $25 credit is going to pay for more than your first month. And this isn't with some rink-a-dink phone. Go get a Nexus 5. Go get an iPhone 5. Go get a feature phone. Go get a hotspot. Go get any nice phone you want. You want a Note? They got them. Go get them. TechSNAP.ting.com. Go see why Ting is truly mobile that makes sense. It's no BS mobile service because you only pay for what you use. Ting takes your minutes, your messages, your megabytes. They add them all up at the end of the month, whatever bucket you fall into, that's all you pay. You want tethering? You want hotspot? Turn it on. It's just built in. It's just part of your data usage. It's not some sort of draconian program you got to get into where you're in a family share program with a $40 data a month plan. Ridiculous. TechSNAP.ting.com. They just say, you know what? It's built into the phone. You want to use Ting as a mobile ISP? Have at it, Haas. Ting don't care. They're honey badger about it. Ting don't care. They like it. And that, you know, the other thing Ting does care, they care about the entire smartphone ecosystem. Android, iOS, all of it. And that's why they've just recently posted backing up your iPhone's SMS messages. If perhaps out there, dear audience member, you're preparing yourself emotionally and fiscally for a new iPhone supposedly to be announced on September 9th, this would be a good time to back up your photos and your messages. Guess what? Ting's tuned into that. That's why they've posted to go over to ting.com/blog. Actually, do me a solid. Go to techsnap.ting.com. Then click the blog link. Also, Ting has a savings calculator. When you go to techsnap.ting.com, you go right there. Plug in your actual usage, not the gimmick that the cell phone company talked you into paying. Right.
Not the big package that just like, don't ever go over because we'll charge you until you bleed.
The one that we all bought because we really wanted that fancy phone that did all those fancy things. So we're like, okay, whatever. Just please give me the new shiny. And then you got caught. Well, guess what? Ting's just like, hey, bro, come over here, plug in your usage, just see what it might cost. It might be a lot, might be a little. Try it out. Click the savings calculator, put your actual usage in there, and then Ting will say how much you would save over a 2-year contract. And here's the best part. Ting has an early termination relief program. You can go to ting.com/ETF. They're going to pay up to $75 per line that you have to cancel. $75 in credit. Okay, if a $25 credit was going to pay for more than your first month, very likely, imagine what a $75 credit per line could do. You could start saving an incredible amount of money, and you could buy the Nexus 5 directly from Ting for $350. Then you've got no contract. You're only paying for what you use, and you own your phone outright. That's amazing. TechSNAP.ting.com. Try out their dashboard. See what I've been talking about. TechSNAP.ting.com. And a huge thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. TechSNAP.ting.com. All right, Alan, is there any other news we want to cover at the top of the show today?
Nope.
All right, then let's arm ourselves, prepare ourselves emotionally for the feedback and the roundup. And I'll say, don't forget, you can go check out episode 52 of BSD Now, where they talk about the DNS. Episode 50, where we talk about Dropbox's new pricing structure and privacy implications. And if you missed any of our LinuxCon coverage, LinuxCon 2014 just wrapped up, and both Linux Unplugged and Linux Action Show featured interviews from the floor with SUSE, IBM, Red Hat, Cumulus Networks, a bunch of I'm blanking, OwnCloud, a bunch of other great folks on projects and big enterprise things. Stopped by and we got some interviews with them. So I think LAS alone featured 5 interviews in one episode, and Linux Unplugged, I believe we featured 3 interviews plus Noah's take from the floor. A couple of great episodes over at JupiterBroadcasting.com. But Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com, or pop in that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. Or perhaps you ingeniously created a brand new thread over at links.techsnap.tv. Good on you. Our first email this week comes in from Dwayne. And speaking of Target and breaching the Target network, he says, hi, Chris and Alan. Great show. I listen every week and I learn new stuff. And your last episode, the traffic light hack, made me think again about air conditioning systems that have web access. My question is, how safe are they? My vendor told me that our system is hack-proof. I know that's not true, so I'm looking for tools to penetrate test our system. It runs Windows 7 Pro that then talks to a standalone box on the network. By typing in the IP address, you're prompted to enter a username and password. The vendor has not updated the system in 2 years. I pray we don't get bumped off. What do you think, Alan?
In general, a few things. You obviously want a strong username and password on that, and B, you might want to try to have that on a completely isolated network.
Yeah.
So that if another machine on your network gets compromised, they can't then jump to that machine. So basically, restricting where it can be accessed to and from.
Yeah, you can even hear how the thinking about the system has been framed over the years. It's a standalone system that you can connect to by plugging its IP address. That's not a standalone system, okay? If you can get to it,
basically be a completely separate network, and, and you kind of probably want to have a filter between. Like, it depends what it has to be able to do. Obviously, you need to be able to access it from your network in order to do stuff on it.
Sure.
Then it's like, well,
Sally's hot. You got to turn up the AC or something, right?
Right. Or so you want to try to make sure that it can't access the internet at all unless you need to be able to control it over the internet. Then your best bet, honestly, is to have some kind of VPN where it allows you to connect to that site and then get on the LAN and connect to it.
Yes.
But you also have to worry about what machines on the LAN should be allowed to access it, right? If you have a LAN with 100 machines on it, probably not every one of those needs access to the HVAC system.
And Dwayne, I just want to say full stop. Any system that hasn't been updated for 2 years is vulnerable. There's just no way around that. There's no way around that. So if that vendor is telling you it's hack-proof, but they haven't applied a single system update for 2 years, then you should probably talk to that vendor because they're lying to you. And you, Dwayne, are obviously picking up on that.
Your best bet, honestly, is just to isolate it as much as possible.
Get it off your network. No one should be able to talk to it.
Network if you can, and only certain designated computers allowed access to it.
Does that computer even need a valid default gateway? Does it need to be on the LAN? Does it need DNS? I mean, all of these things you can do.
He didn't really describe his setup. Like, I don't know if this is one at home or at work or whatever, but it might even make sense to have a system where I have it set up so that there's it's only connected to one other computer, and that computer is used to control the HVAC system, and it doesn't get used to browse the internet, so that you can be sure it doesn't have any malware.
I don't even like that control computer being hooked up to the internet. I don't even like that.
Right, exactly. So a computer that only does nothing else except for control the AC.
Yes. And it's not plugged into your switch. It's not. It doesn't need to be. If they're not updating it for 2 years, it doesn't need to be.
Right, and specifically, like chat rooms asking why is it connected to the net at all. He didn't say it was connected to the internet, only to the LAN.
But if he can get to it from his desk, it's not a good sign.
He needs to make sure that somebody else who can get to it from their desk doesn't get malware. I assume that the guy that's writing in maybe will take the right precautions and not get malware, but you can't assume that about everybody.
And also, I would like to take a minute to reflect on how stupid it is that these vendors are deploying these HVAC systems controlled by Windows 7 Pro. Like, not even server edition of Windows, right? And I know it's just an HVAC app, but I think long term...
When he says... Well, I don't know what the system exactly looks like, so it
I've seen them. I've seen them. They run on... I mean, the ones I've seen run on XP, but this one, the whole...
So it's like an app running on top of Windows 7
it's just a basic app that talks to a hardware box over the network or over a serial connection or something like... Or sometimes USB even. Yep. And it just needs a Windows control OS, but... Right. Basing something that controls the temperature and all of that of your business on a workstation class OS
type things, HVAC remote control systems often also control the security system.
Yeah.
I remember it was Google's headquarters in Australia. Somebody broke into the system and started setting off alarms and turning the cameras off and stuff like that.
All right, next email. Ronnie writes in. Hey guys, you talk about researchers being able to deconstruct malware to get to the code and the comments. Doesn't this also imply that people are able to get at the source code of commercial software as well? If not, why not? Been listening to the show for years, looking forward to more years to come. Ronnie.
Sometimes, not all the time. It really depends on a lot of things. Part of it is, so oftentimes they're just actually running it like in a sandbox and watching each different action that it does. Virtualization was a big win for malware researchers because they could set up a computer where they could pause it and walk through it and stuff. But it depends on the application. Also, certain applications, even malware sometimes specifically will put in mitigations against that, do stuff to make it harder to decompile and stuff.
I think he's referring to, like we've talked about stories before where in the comments of the code there's been Chinese characters.
Right. Sometimes when you compile a program, text strings like that stay. Now, it depends on a bunch of different things. Oftentimes, when you compile it, comments get stripped out, and so there wouldn't be anything there. But sometimes you can still see variable names and other stuff.
Also, I wouldn't call it open source, but when you, on the marketplace, you buy some of these vulnerabilities, you get the source code.
Yeah, some of them you're getting the source code specifically.
So you can modify it. So you can target it. Do stuff. Yeah. Right. So you just get that. You get your hands on
like
that.
Brian Krebs who spend a lot of time working up a fake identity to be on those crime forums and look like one of the baddies. They can just buy it and look at it. And big surprise here. It turns out people buying malware don't have like a lot of probably barriers to entry, you might say, to throw it up on the Pirate Bay. So sometimes when a piece of malware has been around long enough, there are public versions that show up. But what about just decompiling, like taking a hex editor at something? Is that possible, Alan? Well, a hex editor, you can see certain text strings and
certain
stuff,
strings. Yeah.
Now, when you decompile it, you can get more. Some, depending on the language, it'll look more or less usable. Like, for example, Java, you can decompile, although you usually don't get the original variable names. Everything's like A, B, C.
It's been answered out, yeah.
Yeah, because they shorten it to make the code shorter and so on. It really depends on a lot of things and how much work you want to put into it. There's automated ones that are less good, and then you can kind of do more. I don't know. I'm not one of the researchers.
Well, in some of these...
I have to see if I can track down Dave, and we can interview with him. He works at one of the AV places and does some stuff.
Also, though, as you become established in this industry, you build up contacts who have access to this stuff, too, and then they sometimes can provide you with that information, even if you can't get it directly. And what I like about the question, though, is... It's such a great question to ask when we're talking about these stories and we're talking about how they've been analyzing malware. I think it's perfectly reasonable to stop and say, wait, how did they get that?
And stuff that, like, when we looked at some of the reports from like Sophos and FireEye and stuff, some of them, they will have big like screenshots or text dumps of it where they show, here's
Here it
the X
is.
of the code. You
Yep.
can see what's happening here.
Yeah.
Or here's a dump of the assembly instructions this was actually sending to the CPU, and you can see the memory being copied from here to here or whatever. Most of that's way over my head. Sorry.
So speaking of virtualization, Les writes in, it says, "Hi, Alan and Chris, first-time emailer, long-time listener." Love that, Les. He says, "I'd like to get Alan's thoughts on virtualization technologies. I'm putting together 2 servers in my data center to be used for hosting a collection of VMs. Ideally, this will be a combination of VPS using containers and VDS with full VMs to make the best use of resources. To start, there are some obvious options I could go with, such as VMware, or Zen server. There's also things like Proxmox, which we use here at the JB Studios, which could offer both containers and full VMs. However, I'd really love to build a solution that makes use of ZFS and maybe some BSD goodness. I'm thinking that BSD jails would be ideal for the VPS side, but what would you recommend for full-fledged VMs? Is Beehive stable enough for production use? Do you have any recommendations for management tools or the way other VMs could be clustered to provide failover?" So, Alan, is Beehive ready for production use? What is Beehive and what are the management options?
We've been using Beehive in production for a while. The management options are still fairly weak. People haven't written all the tools yet.
So is
I have a
Beehive-
bunch of cobbled together stuff.
Is it equivalent to like a full-fledged virtualizer? Is it a paravirtualizer? What's a like?
It's a It's
Does it do
basically
both?
a full-fledged one, but it relies almost entirely on the processor offload features.
Okay.
So it requires
Gotta have-
specific hardware to work.
You gotta have VX and
And
VXT.
it
and all
currently
that crap.
doesn't do any graphics of any kind. All you get is a serial console.
Okay, so that's a
So you
limitation,
can't run
but
Windows.
for a
or
lot
whatever,
of
but
headless
for a-
servers, not a big deal.
It's exactly. Support in libvirt is getting there. It's almost done, so that existing tools will be able to just work with it.
So anything that uses libvirt might be able to manage
Yep.
Beehive.
And there's a bunch of people working on getting it to be available in OpenStack as well.
That's great.
Separately, it's not done yet, although it's planned to be done in time for FreeBSD 11, which would come out December of 2015, to have Zen, to be able to host Zen instances on FreeBSD as well.
Using Beehive as the back-end virtualizer?
No, just Zen itself.
No,
It's actually been
really?
going on since before Beehive.
Okay.
After Beehive started, but before Beehive had its first release.
Would you run
Separately.
anything, like, would you run the Jupiter Broadcasting website in a Beehive instance at this point?
I run the transcoding servers that we use at Scale Engine in Beehive. Yes,
Well, that's
and
cool.
It's not crashing or anything.
Yeah.
Because the software is Linux only.
Oh, so
Although
they're
I'd
Linux
almost like
guests. They're Linux guests.
Yeah, we're running Linux guests on top of FreeBSD machines.
CentOS or what?
Yeah, CentOS 6.5.
Okay. And what are you using to manage those?
I'm not. Right, there's like one VM on the machine. So
okay.
I have some stuff
So
I
you
cobbled
just-
together.
Okay, so you just, I guess you would just connect to you set up the parameters of the VM, and then if you need to
Yeah, I
manage
have
it,
a
you
shell
just,
script that feeds all the options to the command line and then starts it. And if it dies, it starts it again. But it doesn't die. So when
What
I
about-
when I reboot the host machine to upgrade, I have to start it again.
what are other virtualization options under BSD?
So the main ones you really have for stuff that works right now is
VirtualBox?
VirtualBox.
Yeah.
and
QMU?
Beehive.
Beehive, okay.
QMU
Linux
without
was-
any acceleration, so not fast. Mostly only useful for emulating stuff. So if you want to emulate ARM or MIPS, the QMU stuff works great, but obviously slow.
And
There's no
VirtualBox,
KVM yet.
VirtualBox does have a fairly good VirtualBox server where you can run VMs headless, and they have a VirtualBox management command line interface.
Yeah, we talked about ZFS. Honestly, if I had to do one right now, well, saying this, I'm using Beehive. I'm building one on Beehive right now. But if I was going to do this if I was going to recommend this for somebody else, you would go with VMware or Zen or whatever, and then have the disk for that. Right, you'd have your two machines running that, so they could do hot swap, because that's one of the things Beehive doesn't do yet is live migrations. So you'd have the two machines so that you could live migrate if one of them fails or whatever, or just to load balance. And then the storage would be on a third machine, which you could have, as a free NAS with you using iSCSI or NFS. And then that way you're getting ZFS on it for everything.
Uh-huh.
And then you can just use whatever virtualizer you like.
And that is, so what we have done here at the JB1 studio is Proxmox box has very minimal local storage that we just like use for like VMs we don't really care about that are like sort of dispensable. And then the VMs we care about use an NFS mount to our FreeNAS server. It's an IX Systems FreeNAS box that runs ZFS. And that's where like the important VMs run over NFS. And I have benchmarked it in terms of like just like encoding performance and things like that. It rocks. It's running over NFS has not been a hindrance at all because the NFS connection is faster than like a single spinning 7200 RPM drive. So you get pretty good performance, and I'm able to use Proxmox for my virtualization and ZFS for my storage. It doesn't work for everybody, and I love to see where Beehive's going. The fact that I had no idea that FreeBSD, I thought Zen was a Linux-only thing.
No, there's a lot of work been going on that for a while.
That's really awesome. I mean, that offers some serious portability options for Zen users.
Yep, and also the fact that OpenStack is working on it quite hard, and then the other people. The libvirt, I think, is almost working. Like, I know there are people that are actually using libvirt already.
That's great.
To manage their Beehive. So that means that almost any tool that currently uses libvirt could be made to use that as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good tools. So Beehive for production for the average human, would you say early next year?
It'll depend. Basically, currently, you almost have to run FreeBSD head to get all the features. They get ported back, but it's
FreeBSD 11 is the release to watch.
Yeah. That's for Zen. For Beehive, it depends.
Okay, it just depends on how the progress goes. Yep. All right, our next email comes in from David, and he's picking up on something that you and I were just kind of speculating about last week about trying to gauge how serious an attack is when we see a big news story about it. He writes in, he says, in the most recent TechSNAP, you asked if there was a metric to describe the depth of a penetration of an attack campaign. You might be interested to look into the cyber kill chain, which Alan has actually mentioned on the show before. Yep. Pioneered by Lockheed Martin, and he links us to a crazy long Lockheed Martin URL, which will be in the show notes. He says, this framework...
We've covered this kill chain framework before on the show a couple months ago. But
I know. I'm just kind of doing it for recap because David writes, and he says, this framework,
reminder,
rooted in controversial military doctrine, he says, maps threat actions to common stages of the attack campaign, allowing a clear means of categorizing and communicating the activities of an adversary, and allows responses to be tailored toward the objective and capabilities of an adversary, shortening the time between detection and remediation by not wasting time during the attack on defenses inappropriate to the mode and goal of the adversary. Additionally, the methodology recommends appropriate controls to reduce the capabilities of an attacker at various stages of the kill chain, enabling the defender to select the right tool for the job. I strongly recommend reading their white paper, whether or not your organization adopts the framework.
Yep. It basically kind of goes through, here's all the places where you could have stopped that attack.
Yes.
And then it goes into details of what you would do to prevent them from getting past that point next time.
And in fact, I believe in the episode you covered it, didn't you apply it to a...
This was specifically applied to
a government breach? And you're like, if they had followed the kill chain...
Lockheed Martin did this.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes. And did you know, though, they now have a cool infograph for it? I mean, I don't think they had an infograph when we did it before, Alan.
The episode was TechSNAP 162.
Wow, look at you.
I just Googled it.
TechSNAP 162, where we talk about the kill
this
chain.
is a kill chain analysis of the target breach. And they talk about all the different places target could have stopped the attack.
Yes, that's right.
If they had followed the kill chain analysis framework that Lockheed Martin had come up with.
Yeah. I mean, as our emailer points out, it's very military in its jargon.
Yes.
But that's just how they like it.
Weaponize, deliver, exploit, install, command and control.
That's just how they like it, Alan. That's just how they like it.
But yes, so we talked about it mostly how it applied to target. And so, yes, I think we linked the PDF last time in the show notes. But, wow, that was a while ago now.
Yeah. This is 177.
15 weeks ago? Jesus.
Well, that just tells you.
Good thing you brought it up.
TechSNAP is on top of it, and it's definitely worth revisiting after that long a time.
Yes.
So,
so you should definitely take a look at that PDF if you haven't seen it before.
Thank you, David, for reminding us of the cyber kill chain by Lockheed Martin, who has a lot of money to make in this whole cyber warfare thing. If you'd like to send your question into TechSNAP, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the dropdown. And then send in your networking, your security, your IT, anything like that, send them into the TechSNAP show. You've probably been listening for a while. You have an idea of what we like to talk about, and we'd love to hear your questions. You can also go to links.techsnap.tv and submit them not just to the show, but to the TechSNAP community. And there's a lot of really smart folks out in our community that might be able to answer your question. And a big thank you to all of you who wrote in emails that didn't make it into the show. Mr. Dexter, thank you very much for your emails this week. They didn't make it into the show. And a few others that didn't make it into the show.
Well, we'll have to. We'll get through them.
Oh, we will. I mean, I read all of them always.
Yeah.
Always. In fact, every now and then Alan even responds, like out of the blue. Like some
of them, when I see them, I'm like, oh, well, I have an answer that
right now.
Probably would rather have right now.
Yeah, because sometimes people are like in a serious situation.
If you write into BSD now, you can almost be assured that TJ will respond to you almost instantly. And then depending on what problem you have, you might get an answer from me or Chris as well before the show.
Yeah.
Plus the answer we give on the show.
That's true. We do some, like, as an old sysadmin, I'll look at this stuff and I'll go, oh man, this guy's hurting. I'm going to answer him right now. TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com is also the direct address if you'd like to send it in. We love getting your emails on the show. But Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the roundup of stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, maybe give you some links to read up on your own. And a lot of these links are powered by our amazing subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And our first story takes us to that Linux box that you connected to your TV for some reason and then put on the internet. Yes, your Chromecast. There's another vulnerability which paves the way for another root exploit on Chromecast. I believe this is number 32 of root exploits for the Chromecast device. This next one is a pretty neat one.
Seeing people actually find these and get them fixed, though.
Yes, very much so. And I like this one a lot. So a group of hardware hackers known as like Fail Overflow, Team Eureka, and the GTV hackers have not only discovered a vulnerability in the latest Chromecast software, but also developed a way to exploit it to give you, dear listener, root access. This lets you tinker with the HDMI dongle, enable and disable stuff like software auto updates, and change any setting you wish, among other things. The team is calling it the Hubcap hack, and it works on both newly updated and brand new, fresh out of the box Chromecasts. You need a little extra hardware, though, to make it happen. You need that USB development board called the Teensy, which might ring a bell if you think back to the root hacks on the PS3 back in the day. So you can make, I don't know.
So this one's not so bad if it requires you to have custom hardware and play it into the USB port as opposed to, one that where they can, if you click on a link on your Chromecast, they hack you.
And here's an idea. You know what, guys and gals out there that are doing this? If you want a machine you can hack on, this is just, I'm going to throw this out there. Ubuntu and XBMC. Have at it.
Right. But the Chromecast is nice for its size.
Yes, very true. Very true.
And I can understand people wanting to.
And its price.
It's like when people root their phone. In this case, these guys are rooting the Google TV so they can do whatever they want with it.
Alan, anytime the Netflix Tech Blog has an interesting post, I think it should make it in the roundup. I think we should make that a policy. And this week we have one.
This particular time, they're about internet security. So definitely throw that in there.
What do we got?
So Netflix has released open source 2 of their tools, Scumbler and Sketchy Search.
I love both of them already.
Yeah. So these are their threat analysis tools.
All right.
They actually use these to get information about people that are going to try to attack Netflix.
Who wants to attack Netflix?
So they have one that actually goes through like internet-based discussions, posts, and other bits, and looks for people that are actually organizing to attack Netflix, or sharing vulnerabilities, or doing whatever they're trying to do against
people
Netflix.
Conspiring.
So Scumbler is a Ruby on Rails web app that allows you to set up automated searches of internet and searching for specific content of interest. It's a set of built-in libraries that allow creating searches for Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Plus, you can build custom ones for other sites like hacker forums or whatever. Once you have Scumbler set up, you can run the searches manually or have them happen automatically on a recurring basis.
I like this spelled SCUMBLR, so it even feels
as in
hip.
Tumblr.
Yeah,
but
it's hip, Alan.
It is. Part of it, most of what Scumbler is based on is a Ruby gem called Workflowable.
Yeah.
Which they've also open sourced.
You got to have Ruby on Rails 409.
Allows you to create like a workflow diagram that'll explain how you're going to go through all this stuff. So a bunch of this is just general plumbing stuff that'll be useful for building other apps not related to security or Netflix. And then on top of that, they have their security tools. I'm wondering how much of these you could use almost the same thing for like market research and stuff. Just like looking for any instances of your company.
People
being
talking about your
Facebook
company and what are they saying about you?
But at the same time, they're talking about other stuff. I noticed that just over at the side here, they in their archive, they also have a scaling their A/B testing for Netflix using Node.js.
Hey.
But anyway, you can see here they're talking about a distributed denial of service attack that's going to go against Netflix and how they found it.
Really cool. They're open sourcing these tools.
Redis and Sidekick, and use their workflowable stuff, and they have screenshots. And
so this is
sketchy.
These
is a
are
screen capture.
These
tool.
are now. Do you know? Did you see? I didn't see in the article. Did you see any mention of the license these are under? Because these are really cool tools. They're on GitHub now. So I mean, there you go.
And they also have a pre-built Docker of the sketchy tool if you want that as well.
Wow. Boy, Netflix has the coolest GitHub page I have ever seen. It looks like the Netflix site. Have you gone to this? Netflix.github.io?
Well, the .io ones are the ones that you actually get to control.
Yeah, they've got the best looking one I've ever seen. It looks like Netflix. It's like Netflix for code.
CSS. Oh, and I love they stick the OSS. It's the open source software.
Yeah, buddy. That's cool.
Oh, because they have a bunch of other tools are available on there, including Simian Army.
Yep.
Which is they have a whole series of tools named after different types of monkeys that go in and break their servers. They do that on purpose.
They also have the Governor. And, when you click it, it has like a play button, too, and then it takes you specifically to that GitHub page. This is so cool. Look at Netflix go.
They have more stuff on here than I thought they did.
Yeah, they do. Zool's on here,
Zool.
too. Yeah.
And, they have Asgard, which is a big Thor hammer.
Yeah. Pigpen.
Yeah.
Security monkey.
Lipstick on a pig.
And there's Scumbler. They're in Sketchy. There they are. This
Security
is really
monkey, Scumbler, and Sketchy.
This is really neat. This is the kind of like the coolest GitHub page I've ever seen.
Yes. Well, they hire cool people.
Yeah, they do. That Netflix. I tell you what, it's not just about good TV shows. All right, you've probably seen the headlines. The FBI and the Secret Service are investigating reports of major cyber attacks.
It's the Apache 2.0 license.
Oh, on the Netflix
Scumbler.
Very good. So there's not a lot of details on this yet, but here's how the statement comes from Reuters. They say we are working with the United States Secret Service to determine the scope of the recently reported cyber attacks against several American financial institutions. This is according to an FBI spokesperson.
At least 5 banks that had information stolen from them, including apparently checking and saving account details.
Now, the FBI and the Secret Service won't give out any specific firm details, but based on other reporting, we do know that J.P. Morgan Chase was the victim of a recent cyber attack, according to 2 people familiar with the incident who asked not to be identified because they were not authorized to speak publicly about the matter. So they declined to elaborate on the severity of the incident, saying that J.P. Morgan was still conducting their own investigation to determine what happened. Now, on Wednesday, so yesterday, Bloomberg News reported that Russian hackers, it's either Russian or Chinese always, were believed to have carried out cyber attacks against JP Morgan Chase and other unnamed U.S. banks in mid-August, resulting, according to this report, in the loss of sensitive data. Authorities are investigating whether the breaches were linked to recent attacks also on major European banks. The New York Times reported late Wednesday that the networks of JP Morgan and at least 4 other U.S. banks had been infiltrated in a string of coordinated attacks this month, citing 4 different people familiar with the investigation. The attackers stole large quantities of data, including checking and savings account information, though their motivation is still unclear, according to the New York Times report, which said several private security firms have been hired to conduct forensic reviews of the infected networks. So we could be about to see a major story revealed.
Yeah, it's interesting when they say that they lost data. I'm pretty sure they just mean that data was disclosed
or copied.
yeah. If basically data was leaked, if the bank actually lost the data, that's a much bigger story. Because what's up with their backup?
They did a move, Alan. They did a move.
Yeah. Anyway, next story.
Good point. The next story in the roundup is something that, boy, am I excited about. Seagate announced they are shipping the world's first 8-terabyte hard drive.
Yes, 8-terabyte hard drive with a regular SATA 6G interface. So that means it'll be something you could actually get and plug into your computer at home.
Today.
Although I imagine, I don't know, they've not made clear, there's not much detail about it. We don't know if it's like 7,200 RPM or they're more they're
5,900.
strange 5,900
Yeah.
RPM dynamic
Not
speed
54, ladies and gentlemen, 5,900.
The 5,900 is their dynamic speed thing. Although it seems to be targeted towards enterprise, but we don't have a lot of the specs yet.
Oh, I mean, at first, right? I mean, I would imagine initially it's going to be an enterprise drive, but it'll trickle down.
They say that they have one new feature in it that makes it really good for data centers, which is the enhanced rotational velocity tolerance, which makes it reliable for performance in multi-drive enclosures. So basically, when you put a bunch of hard drives together, like in a server chassis, because each one's spinning, they all spin exactly the same. You can get a harmonic that can cause vibration and slow the drives down and cause problems, or just cause the head to miss the spot and read.
I mean, I'm superstitious. I believe it's also led to drive failures, even.
Right, and vibration is bad. So these ones do things to mitigate that, so you can safely stuff more drives in one big chassis. Because we're starting to see chassis where you can sit like 96 drives in a single chassis, and that's pretty crazy, right? And then if you're going to stick a bunch of these chassis in the rack, this extra rotational vibration stuff should make that work even better. So it'll be really nice to see what you can do by filling a machine with 8 terabyte drives.
8 terabytes per drive.
And based on Seagate's previous statements, this one will be the regular perpendicular magnetic recording technology they invented quite a few years ago.
No helium?
Seagate says they're investigating helium, but at this point they don't need it to make bigger drives.
Oh, that makes me excited, because that means, like, do you think, Alan...
Well, because like when we saw the helium, 6 terabyte drives from Hitachi, they're like $800 or more. The helium seems to make them very expensive.
Oh, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Or I'm wondering if we'll see a big price drop there when these 8 terabyte ones come out, and it turns out that price premium was just only people that need that big in a single drive should pay, and they obviously...
So
if they need that much storage, they will have an infinite budget, basically.
Yeah. This is the thing, is I let the enterprise have at it, and then let the prices drop, and I will buy one. Do you, I mean, so for me, like the benchmark...
I'm hoping this, if these are available for desktop, it should push the price of like 3 terabyte drives way down. And they're already down to like $100 and $120.
I don't see. This is where I got hung up. As when we hit 3 terabyte, that broke my brain. I was like, that's huge. 8 terabytes, that's ridiculous. What should I reset now as the new unbelievable size? 32 terabytes? Is that?
Well, we've been stuck at 3 terabytes for a long time. We saw there were some 4s, but they were that 5,900 RPM, and it's like,
don't want
not as fast. I'll just have more 3s.
Yes.
And then there's a couple of 6s came out, but they're stupid expensive. Like Seagate had a 6 terabyte drive, but it was enterprise only. They never bothered with the desktop. And then now with the 8 terabyte, I'm like,
So what do I wait for? 14 terabytes? Is that when I should be impressed again? At what point?
The Seagate 6 terabyte drives.
Yeah.
They're 4 terabyte drives. So they finally came up with a desktop 4 terabyte drive.
Yeah.
And they stuffed 4 of their regular 1 gigabyte platters. So the normal 3 terabyte drive was 3 1 terabyte platters. And so the 4 terabyte one, they rearranged some stuff inside to be able to squish an extra one in there. So the middle screw holes were gone because they had to fit that many more platters and the screw hole was in the way. So you had the two ends, almost nobody uses the middle anyway, but so they got rid of those middle screw holes. And that worked quite well, but so we don't know for the 8 terabyte ones whether they've gone with 4 2 terabyte spindles or platters, or if they've gone with some insane number of 1.6 terabyte spindles. So it'll be interesting to see not only how what the specs are for this drive when it actually comes out, but whether it's going to be some kind of platform where we could go even bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If they somehow made 4 terabyte platters, which I doubt, but if they did,
that'd be huge.
There's 2 of them in this 8 terabyte drive. That means that they could probably quite simply come out with a 12 terabyte one.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
But if they've done this other one, if they've managed to cram 4 2 terabyte platters in there, which even that seems, fitting 4 platters seemed to be a problem for the 4 terabyte drive. Now that they're doing it for the 8, it's like, wow. does that mean we might see a cheap 6 terabyte drive based on 3 of those platters?
That'd be sweet. You know what we need is to get the platter question solved. Is we need somebody out in the TechSNAP audience to not only buy an 8 terabyte drive,
well,
and then open it up.
Only available to specific OEMs.
Yeah.
But they should be available on the market in the next quarter. And since we're almost into the next quarter now, hopefully we'll see more details soon.
Maybe someone will send one into TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com.
I'm guessing someone at one of the hardware review, all the hardware review sites are clamoring to get a hold of this to see what it is, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Alan, this next item on the roundup, it's so important. The DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and FBI partnered up to warn everyone about Google dorking. Yes, dear citizen, Google dorking is something you need to be worried about. In a restricted intelligence document distributed to police, public safety, and security organizations in July, the Department of Homeland Security warned of malicious activity that could expose secrets and security vulnerabilities in organizations and information systems. This activity is called Google dorking. And a quote from this warning: malicious cyber actors are using advanced search techniques referred to as Google dorking to locate information that organizations may not have intended to be discoverable. What?
Do you know what's really funny? When we talked about this exact thing being in the NSA's guidebook of how to get information.
You're
so basically, this is searching for Excel documents people didn't mean to put online.
And here, Alan, just for law enforcement, just a warning sign. If somebody you're investigating is using something called, this is scary, so I don't want to scare the audience, but maybe young listeners want to mute for a second, search operators. If you're using search operators, it's really scary, and you're searching for things like file type :XLS, you could be behaving as a, quote, malicious cyber actor.
Yeah. So basically, this is... many times, places that aren't technically savvy will accidentally put stuff up on the internet when they didn't mean to.
They also
or put it up on the internet so they give somebody a link to it, not realizing that Google would crawl it, and now anybody that Google searches for it can find.
They put their SharePoint site publicly or something like that.
If you remember back to the story near the top, we know that WordPress 3.2.1 is vulnerable. Well, if you Google for the little string WordPress puts in the footer when the site runs 3.2.1, then you can get a list of sites running 3.2.1, which you could probably hack.
Hey, Alan, also, as another warning indicator that you might be a cyber terrorist, if you've ever used, and this is in quotes, GNU's wget, you might be a hacker. You might be a hacker if you've ever used wget. And that's a warning sign.
Somebody... in that trial of the guy that downloaded the data... the guy that downloaded the data from AT&T.
Oh, right.
On the first set of iPads or whatever.
Yep.
They said that, yes, they tried to accuse him. He used a hacker tool, wget, to download the data.
Snowden has been charged with the same thing to get the PowerPoint presentations.
Yes. He used it to just grab everything in a directory.
Yeah.
Because that's what wget was designed for.
They call it, by the way, and I'm not even making this up. It's a quote. Automated hacking tool, wget. Good automated hacking tool, GNU's wget.
It's a website copying tool. It's designed to copy a website.
Personally, I use it to download packages.
Copy things, people put it on the website. I use Fetch because BSD isn't evil.
Because you're not a hacker, right?
Yeah.
You're a white hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan. The Ministry of Justice has been fined 180,000 pounds for losing sensitive data on prisoners.
Well, not encrypting it as well. So there was a problem a couple of years ago where some data got leaked on like 16,000 prisoners, and in response, they mandated that everybody start using encryption and stuff. So it turns out at this prison, data was being backed up to an external hard drive, which they then lost. That's not a good backup strategy. Exposed 3,000 prisoners' personal information plus prisoner logs and other stuff.
Come on, it is 2014.
This external drive they bought advertised on the box that it had encryption.
Oh, well, then problem solved.
Turn it on. They hadn't enabled the encryption. And because of that, the data was in plain text on the drive. I would say that relying on the encryption sold to you as part of the external hard drive, I've never seen how those work properly.
Yeah, I call that bullet point encryption. It's a feature on the side of the box.
Yep.
Don't rely on it.
Yep. And also, if you expect it to work, you have to turn it on.
Now, this next story, same with the JP Morgan story we just talked about a few minutes ago. Tons of traction online, tons of momentum behind it, but the details severely lacking. But the headline just alone is worth talking about. 300 oil companies are hacked in Norway. Side note, Norway has 300 oil companies.
I was going to say, why are there 300 oil companies?
Right? National Security Authority of Norway has revealed that 50 companies in the oil sector were hacked and 250 more are now being warned. Okay, so think about that. The headline is 300 oil companies hacked. Turns out 50 companies hacked, 250 have been warned. Now, the National Security Authority, the NSM, is a Norway prevention unit for serious hack attacks. Norway's largest oil company, which is called Statoil, was the target of an attack. Head of press at Statoil said that we've received a warning and we are checking our systems according with routines. Okay. So their public statement, the number one oil company, their public statement is, we were told we've been hacked and we're looking into it. But the headline is 300 Norway oil companies. And I have seen this on every major news site on the net this week.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on here?
Translation problem.
Yeah, maybe that's all it is. All right, Alan.
So, next up, there's this researcher that he's Danish that we have the blog post here from. Likes to read those RFCs, right? The request for comment. They're basically the specifications that make up the internet protocols. And there's one for tel : // which is the URI identifier for telephone numbers. But it was invented a very long time ago, and so a lot of things have changed. The way we use computers have changed.
Sure. Yeah.
Cell phones didn't exist when this was invented.
Okay.
So he was looking into it and read it, and he's like, I wonder how this works on iOS. I bet Apple, being Apple, have their own separate standard from everybody else. And they do.
Oh.
And it's not very long. So he read it all. And then when reading it, he was like, oh, I see here. They very specifically mentioned this. I wonder if anybody actually does it. So if you click on a tel : / link in Safari, it will, your iOS or Mac or whatever.
It'll dial it?
It'll pop up a thing and say, do you want to dial this number?
Oh, okay.
And you can say yes. However, if you click on it in a native app, it's the app's job to confirm that you wanted to do that.
And just to be clear, it's just an href equals tel : / and a series of numbers. It's just a simple, almost like HTML link. And if you're in an app,
it's an HTML link. And so the
app
idea
that has its own web browser, for example, like Twitter.
So the idea is so that you can make an app that will call people. You wouldn't. If somebody made a custom contact list app, or if you had like a company phone directory app you gave all your employees, you wouldn't want to, when you click on the person to say call them, for the phone to be like, are you sure you want to call them? Right? That would be annoying.
No, it's your contact management app. Of course.
Right, yeah, so it's up to the app to do that. But the problem is that Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and so on, when they wrote their apps, never read the specification.
Oh.
So if you send somebody a message via Facebook Messenger with a link in it, and they click the link, you can then use JavaScript or server-side redirect to make them go to this tel : / URL. And it'll dial it immediately without any user input.
So you can spam them via Facebook Messenger.
So you can spam this out to people and have them call your 900 number that charges them per minute.
Genius.
Or something like that.
Obvious, too. So obvious. Again, so obvious.
In this one, the user has to somehow navigate to a page where you've set up the JavaScript, but the user doesn't actually have to click the tel link, because you can use JavaScript or a server-side redirect to force them to go to that URL. And then because the software from Gmail, G+, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., doesn't actually implement its own handler for it, iOS will just dial it immediately.
There you go.
Now, the only reason that probably doesn't work on my Android is that my Android's like, would you like to call this with the Google phone app or Skype or this other app?
Yeah, which app would you like to use to make this transaction? Funny, that's exactly how it would happen on my Nexus 5 too.
Yeah, and that would stop it. That vulnerability. That's probably the only thing keeping that vulnerability from working on Android as well.
And
most people implements the original RFC, not the Apple one.
Funny.
But, there's lots of cool information if you want to go read that, and it's just an interesting 0-day you could use against iOS apps,
and
based on the fact that even Google doesn't read Apple's RFCs.
Oh, good times. All right. One of my favorite thing, couch surfing, has been hacked, and Airbnb is getting some spam as a result. What's going on, Alan?
No. So when they somebody somehow got into the mailing list server or something at Couchsurfing and sent all the Couchsurfing people a message saying use Airbnb instead, which is basically Couchsurfing's competitor.
That's the worst, actually. If you think about it, that's the worst.
Yeah. Well, they could have sent you phishing or something. And
I suppose. It hurts, though.
It was not properly formatted, so the link wasn't actually clickable, but
those dorks.
It was meant to be, but miming coding is hard.
Good enough. You know, have you heard about all the controversy around Uber hiring people to go into Lyft cabs and do poaching and like take up their time?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but like scheduling a pickup and then canceling it at the last minute. Doing all kinds of things to screw their competitors.
You know, it's just how business goes, Alan.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're a sysadmin, this next roundup story might apply to you. What's going on, Alan?
Yeah. So Mozilla is going to revoke trust in all 1024-bit certificate authority certificates.
Wait a minute.
In the latest version of NSS.
What? Firefox is going to revoke what?
Right. So browsers ship with this list of certificate authorities that they trust, right?
Yep.
And as we've talked about, no certificate authority has been allowed to issue a certificate less than 2048-bit since like 2012, the end of 2012. Remember when we covered
Yep.
I forget the name of the guys, but the big PDF where all the browser manufacturers agreed this is how we're going to do it.
We covered it like a year ago.
Yeah. Well, we covered it like 2 years ago, then the updated version 1 year ago. Yeah. And there'll probably be another one this November.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
So in the latest version of the Netscape security software thing, they're going to take all the 1024-bit CA certificates out of the trust chain. So anything signed by those CAs will not be trusted anymore. Because those CA certificates could be compromised because they're not strong enough. They're only 1024-bit.
You got to do this. This is important. It's house cleaning.
Now, the confusing thing can be that a bunch of these certificates have expiration dates that don't expire until like 2020 because they were created with those dates like 30 years ago or whenever they were set up. But it just means that if you happen to be using something signed by one of the certificates, things can stop working all of a sudden when you do the update. So you need to watch out for it. Most things shouldn't, but a lot of internal stuff that was set it and forget it with like infinite expiration dates and stuff, all of a sudden might break.
Yeah.
The biggest news is that this new version of NSS will be shipping as part of Firefox 32, which should come out early next week.
And I think has some early versions of electrolysis installed, which is process isolation and separation. Don't know, but I think they're starting to lay the groundwork for that. So, Firefox, if you're not following it, has some really great releases coming up. So if you're not a current Firefox advocate, might be time to check it out. I'll tell you something. Nobody's really an advocate.
NSS is a separate package available, and most systems will have that now. It's the certificate chain trusted by like curl and wget and stuff, so you can do SSL.
Word.
So yeah, all of a sudden a bunch of stuff might stop working, especially if it's based on old SSL certificates. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that. If stuff starts breaking all of a sudden next week or this week, or next time you update NSS, that's why.
I don't think this surprises anybody that's ever worked at all in any kind of customer service position, but a leaked Comcast employee metric shows what we all kind of figured. You got to close or you're out of there. What do you think, Alan? Is this surprising to you that Comcast ISP policy is retention?
There's that call the recorded call the other day where the guy was trying to call to cancel and had to spend like half an hour explaining that I don't want to upgrade my package.
It's not just that one. There's been like 4 subsequent recordings since that one that have been released that are like that.
And Comcast, remember they said this isn't how we train our employees?
Yeah, well, it turns out.
And so here's what they actually train. So there's a short list of times when you're allowed to not try to sell somebody something. And so if you read that one, it's like there's certain phrases you can say, and once you say them, they won't try to sell you stuff anymore.
So these are the ones we need to all know.
With that all the time.
Now that I have Comcast at JB1, I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this.
You have to talk to them, say this, and they won't try to sell you anything.
Yeah, you can't really blame the people, right? I mean, this is what they've been told to do.
It's like if you don't upsell this, if you don't sell enough stuff, we're gonna fire you.
Here's I love this. Oh man, I love this corporate crap. Examples / coaching guidance. Don't forget about care, clarify, ask questions, resolve, and end with a trial close. Don't forget about ARP, acknowledge, respond, and pivot. And don't forget about ARC, acknowledge, respond, and close. What a bunch of D-bags.
Yeah.
Okay, is this the last story in the roundup? Is this possible? Yep. Could it be a Krebs on security story? Last story in the roundup this week. These razor-thin ATM insert skimmers. Oh, man.
So normally a skimmer that steals your credit card at an ATM machine had to, like, it kind of stuck out from the machine, and so people got to learn to look for them. And banks started, like at my bank, they put this weird green twisty thing on there to make it so that one can't be put on there because it's not a flat surface, and to make it obvious that if there is one, right, or if that's missing or something, just to give you more of a hint. But this one fits right in the slot and basically becomes invisible, so you can't see that it's there. And it basically runs off a tiny little, like a, what is it, CR2012 battery?
Watch battery?
So, like the BIOS battery that's in a motherboard.
Oh, even flatter and wider.
Yeah, it's about the size of a quarter. But
yeah.
And it goes in there, and when you stick your card in, it reads the data off the magnetic stripe. And they said that interestingly, they find that those ones don't often get used with a pin pad overlay, right? So some of the skimmers, to steal your PIN number, they put things on the button so they could read what buttons you pressed.
Or a camera.
Yeah, these ones aren't doing that. They found most times they're using a camera. So they talk about how these were big in Europe, and this is where this one was found. And they're like, well, we use chip and pin, but all of our machines are capable of doing stripe cards because Americans only have stripe cards.
Yeah.
And all of our cards, because people need to be able to use them where places in other countries that don't have chip and pin, means that our cards, the magnetic strip has the data on it still.
Yeah. They're kind of stuck because they have to support legacy systems.
They steal the cards in Europe when they get stuck in the ATM, they read the magnetic stripe, and then they take them to the States where people don't require the chip and pin, and then they can use them to commit fraud.
Do you think when the U.S. rolls
in
out,
October of 2015, when the U.S. finally rolls out chip and pin, that should help a bunch.
Do you think it will, or do you think they'll just go somewhere else? I mean, I know as far as like
even just going from Europe to the States is it stands out worse, right?
Yeah.
It's like if the person's still doing transactions in Europe, they're probably not in the States at the same time.
Yeah.
And
you're going to have a massive cut down.
If you don't have a history of going to the States, your bank is probably going to deny that charge.
Yeah. Chip and pin's coming, Alan, and I almost feel like the U.S. has to do it to...
Well, it's Visa and MasterCard have told stores, if you don't have it by October 2015, any fraud's on your head, not us.
Well, and it's kind of gotten ridiculous at this point.
Well, we've had it in Canada for a while, and they've had it in Europe for ages.
It's funny, though, because I am beginning to see a bit of pushback about it. People don't want it.
People don't want it? I'd much rather type in my 4-digit PIN than have to sign. I hate signing. It's such a stupid system.
Well, and every time I sign, it never looks like the last time I signed.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's such a dumb system. Yeah. All right, Alan, was there anything else we want to cover in this episode of TechSNAP?
Nope.
Okay, well then I'll lay down some basics. Let's start with the time math. That's your strong suit. I'd love to have you watch us live. Go over to jblive.tv. We start, if you're on the West Coast, at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Now, not next week and not the week after, but coming up, we'll be doing a double TechSNAP, and that's an example of a great time to tune in live. There's so much stuff that happens on a TechSNAP program in between segments, before the show, that just doesn't make it in the download.
If you didn't watch this week.
Yeah, including viral videos that Alan recommended that were actually hilarious. When Alan recommends a viral video, it turns out it's a good viral video. It's not,
Well, it was recommended to me by some people from the previous declusterment team.
Well, there you go. No wonder. It was vetted, you might say. Last but not least, too, we want to get your feedback. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. You can also subscribe via RSS. We've got links in every single episode show notes right below the show post. We got RSS feeds. You subscribe, you get the show weekly. It's kind of magic. There's great podcast catchers out there now. We're also listed in just about every podcast directory, so if you just search it, you'll see the TechSNAP program. All right, there you go. Boom, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.